Okay, we're in the third shiur of Kitzur, of the halachas of Shabbos and of Erev Shabbos. That's the Siman that we're up to now, and we are moving along with Sif Tes. We did Sif Tes. We're up to Sif Yud. Okay, Mitesha. So yesterday we discussed doing work, and we were saying that there's a difference between work and business. Work, we said you have to stop from Mincha Kitana, which is 2.5 hours before Shabbos, and business you have to stop an hour before. Business means being in an office or a store or something like that. We are not doing labor. We mentioned some exceptions if you need it for Shabbos or if it's a hirka, let's say, or things like that. Yeah. That you have to what? No, someone asked that before from in the Gemara. You're saying you said that?
No, was that someone?
No, we said but that was at the end. We'll talk about that later. We can talk about it later. That had to do with taking the haircut. It said before chatzos, but that was talking about starting it, not necessarily finishing it. You could, once you start it, you don't have to stop. You could continue. You have to start it before, but once you start, you can continue. It doesn't say you have to stop. It says you have to start. Okay, let's go.
Not a lot of salt in the haircut.
Let's leave that for now. Let's leave that for now because that's not what we're talking about. What? Okay, that's something else. Let's go further. We're up to Sif Yud. Mitesha shoyis zmaniyos ulamayla. Now, the next thing is like this. There's another issue of Friday as well. The issue would be with a meal. Okay, what are the issues with a meal? What are the issues with a meal? So there's three things. Number one is a very basic one, which is similar to Pesach to some degree. Pesach, you have to go before Pesach. You're supposed to be on an emptier stomach, so you should enjoy the matzah and the other things. So Shabbos also, you're about to come into Shabbos, you have to have a Suda. You need to be able to enjoy the Suda, and if you go full stuff because you ate the whole Friday, you're not going to. It's a little different because you don't have a chiyuv to have the same type of thing. It's not a mitzvah d'oraisa so that you have to have specific types of foods, but some people do say that. Another reason also that would be, which is because sometimes you're so busy preparing for Shabbos that you're so busy preparing for the meal that you're eating on Friday that you're going to forget to prepare for Shabbos. So therefore, you have to make sure that you don't have any meals, and this way you're able to focus on Shabbos more than just on Friday. And the third thing, which is similar, would be that if you make Friday into such a special day that you're making special meals and things like that, then you're basically equating Shabbos and Friday. It's not respectful to Shabbos. Shabbos is a day on its own, which is a very special holy day. You can't make Friday the same thing. So these are a few reasons why we don't want to have su'udis on Friday. Now, when does that happen? You wake up in the morning, you're not allowed to have cereal and milk. So let's see. Let's just read it inside and then we'll take questions. So let's see it inside. He says like this. It's not necessarily what the Alter Rebbe says, but this is what he says. He says from 9 hours and on, which I guess actually is similar to what the Alter Rebbe. I'll explain in a second. He says from 9 hours and on, you shouldn't establish a set meal. Which means you shouldn't have a full soda, which means to wash generally exactly. Even if it's something that you do normally have during the weekday. So let's say lunch, you always have pizza and the whole thing. So on Friday, after that hour, you shouldn't do that. Now, well, that's a regular meal that you normally have, so don't do it from that hour, the 9th hour and on. But what about a soda that you don't normally have? Yeah, so usually you have some people have in America, they have a Danish and something coffee for breakfast. Not a great breakfast at all, but for some people that do that. And all of a sudden Friday, you're going out and you're having hamaitzi and you're having a whole 4-course thing. So this is a suda that you're not used to doing. You don't do this every other day. So then afilu sudas mitzvah, even if it's a sudas mitzvah, if it's a sudas mitzvah that you could have chosen the day. Okay, we'll see soon. Not always can you choose the day, but assuming it was a sudas mitzvah that you could have chosen the day, you should not choose Friday. Don't do it on Friday. I feel about biker even in the morning. Now, it's not always so simple because sometimes you don't have a choice. So, sudas mitzvah shizmana kavua hayir. Let's say you have a sudas mitzvah that has to be on Friday. For example, could go in Milo. Someone has a bris. It's always going to be on the day that it's supposed to be. And by the way, the place can say even after the 8th day. Someone just mentioned today about a baby that didn't have a bris yet because it was yellow. So sometimes the bris is pushed off. So it's not on the right day. If it's not on the right day, then what? You have to eat and have a whole suda? So then the halacha would be yes, because even though the bris is not on the 8th day, to leave a child as an orla and not have a bris is also a problem. It's a mitzvah to do it as soon as you could. So that would be called something that would be called something that you should do on Friday, even if it's after the 8th day. Now, so that would be one example. One second. Another example would be pidyon aben. These are things that fall out on that specific day. Other things that they bring from the Alter Rebbe. Another example would be sudas erusin unesuyin. Let's say an engagement or marriage. In those days, engagements and marriage were the same thing. They did it. In those days they were separate. In other words, what we do by chuppah, we do erusin and then we right away do kiddushin. But they used to do them, or nisuyin, I say rather. But they used to do them separately. When we do an engagement, which for us is really, it's nothing. It's just a party. But then they used to do what would be called erusin, which was the first stage of marriage. So it actually was a more significant thing. So either of those seudas you do also do on Friday. Why? You can get engaged or married any day. Because in those days they were nervous that if they don't get married right away, someone else might quickly get married, and therefore you start as soon as you can, and this way she's already mikudeshes to some degree, and therefore you don't push it off. And also marriage, if it's the first opportunity you had, you should do it even if it's a Friday, because the whole idea is that we want to be able to start families, and you can't do that until you're married. So therefore, that should be something you should do right away as well. In fact, what they used to do was they would, on occasion, they would, or maybe more than on occasion, they would get married on a Friday, and this way, when they didn't have money, and they would they wouldn't have a meal, and the meal would be Friday night, because this way, anyways, everyone has to do stuff for Shabbos, so they would make the meal Friday night meal, and this way they would get married earlier. So that was something that people did. Okay, we'll leave that for now. So that's an example. Now, there's another example also the Kitzur Shulchan brings, which was a Lubavitcher place, his name was Reb Chaim Noah, and he basically says that if it's a bar mitzvah, even though if that's the day of his bar mitzvah, that could count as a sudas mitzvah, especially if he's doing like a siyum or something else, so that could count as well. Now, we also had this, if you recall, a few times already, where Purim fell out on Friday. So then also you have to have a Suda on Purim. So if you have to have a Suda on Purim, so then it's a mitzvah that fell out on that day. So what are you going to do in those situations? So there's always a whole talk about it. When we get closer to Purim, maybe we'll fill you in. But the point is you will have a Suda on that day because you don't have a choice. The question is, when will you do that? So the halacha says, mutter, in those days, you could do that. Now, what happens if you eat so much and it comes to Friday night, you're not hungry? It's okay. You did what you had to do. The mitzvah came, you had to have a Suda, so you did. Later on, you filled yourself up and now you're full. Okay, that's a separate thing. You have to look at how it is now. But they're both mitzvahs. Now, one second, let me finish the sieve. I'll take questions. We call Malkim. Now, even though you can go all the way till, like we said, the 9th hour or the end of the 9th hour, but Nochel Aktima Babaker. According to the Kitzur, he says that really what you should do is better, even these mitzvahs, to do them in the morning. Now, the Alter Rebbe is not as strict, it seems like. The Alter Rebbe says these mitzvahs that fall out on that day, really, you could start all the way to the 10th hour of the day, till the 10th hour of the day. So let's say, for example, 6 o'clock in the morning is let's say when the day starts. So to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 to 11 to 12 to 1 to 2 to 3, it's 9 hours. And once you finish 3 o'clock, so after 3 o'clock would be the 10th hour. So according to the Alter Rebbe, you can go all the way till then. You don't have to do it, like he's saying over here about Baker. So you could go all the way till then. It's okay. So Purim, that's what ended up happening. A lot of people would basically, as long as you started before the 10th hour, then you were good to go. Now, the people that they did say, look, if you could also do it in the morning, then why not? To satisfy everyone. But according to the Alter Rebbe, especially the people that were shluchim and they wanted to be able to do miftzayim and bachrim, so then people didn't have to start that early. And he also says, you shouldn't have too much food if possible. But again, you do as you do. Now, in general, besides for the Sudas mitzvah, let's say you're just sitting in your house and you're just getting ready for Shabbos. You should make sure not to just eat randomly a lot of food, even if it's not part of a Suda. Suda means you're washing and everything. But even if you're not, you're just sitting and whatever, you still shouldn't go overboard more than usual. Because you want to be able to make sure that you're going to have a Suda Shabbos on a hungry stomach. Then they asked the Alter Rebbe, let's say you have a bris, and you're going to have people that will gather. And I'm sorry, I think this was about a bris actually, that you still shouldn't make the meal too extravagant like you would other times. But even then, the Alter Rebbe does bring an opinion that it should only have exactly 10 people levad min shaykh in the Suda, besides for those that are shaykh to the Suda. So if it's a bris, you have a lot of relatives, they're shaykh to the Suda. probably closer relatives. And then there's a few other people. So in other words, you should make it smaller. But again, imagine a person's on shluchas and they have a bris, let's say. So could you think of a better opportunity to get people to come? You can put on tefillin and give out Shabbos candles. So obviously that would take precedence. But there is an idea that Friday you shouldn't get too distracted with all these big things. Now let's say you just want to have snacks or food or mezainis or things like that. So and it's not a set su'udah. You go on Muftzayim and then you stop off and you have something to eat after. So that's okay if it's on Friday. That's okay because it's not you're not having a whole su'udah with washing and everything. Okay, so let's take some questions. You had a question first? Yeah, I thought it was first. Kate.
If you choose to have a Suda on Friday, so no, sorry, if you choose to do the event with Siman or whatever on Friday, maybe you're not supposed to, let's say you already did it, are you still obligated to have such mitzvah?
Yeah, if it's something like that, you should. Yeah, it's a mitzvah. So this mitzvah, it's a mitzvah.
Maybe two.
Yeah.
Well, very
There is, well, you know what, even for a siyum, I would say, some would say, ideally, you could choose when to do the siyum. That is true. But a siyum is also, the quicker you do the siyum, the more you celebrate the fact that you finish an Indian in Torah. Siyum is a very important thing. The Gemara talks about that people didn't make a siyum and it wasn't good for them, or the opposite. Maybe they did make a siyum and they praised them. I think it's actually... It's in the end of our Gemara, maybe? I'm not sure. But either way, there is an Indian to make a siyum. So pushing it off is not, I would say if a guy does it, because that's, maybe it's a good thing. I don't know. You think you make a sudas mitzvah, it's a mitzvah. So, right, ideally, well, he didn't say not to exactly make the siyum, but if possible, not to, I think, yeah. But if someone did, then to say, oh no, now we're not going to eat because it's the wrong day, it's after the fact, I think at that point you would be able to do it anyways. But I'm not 100% sure. When you make your siyum on Friday, we'll talk. For now, everyone at Danish is yesterday, it's all good. Yeah.
Some people do like Tayyama,
So we spoke about this. We spoke about this yesterday. Toyama doesn't mean you're washing. It doesn't mean you're having a suda. It just means that you're tasting from the food. So you could taste from the food. You're allowed to have soup. You're allowed to have a little piece of chicken. That's fine. What he's saying over here is that you shouldn't have, number one, a proper suda, and number two, you shouldn't stuff yourself too much. Between those two. Okay, Sif Yud Aleph. Yeah, you had a question? Sif Yud Aleph. Okay, now here's an interesting thing. Chayev kol adam lahashlim parsha yoytzav im hatzibur. There's a chiyuv that everyone needs to finish the parsha every week with the tzibur, with the congregation. Now, obviously, we're talking about Shnai Mikra. That's what we're going to talk about. But here's an interesting thing. The word that he uses is chayev. You're required to. Why does he use such a word? Because if you look in the Gemara and everywhere else, it describes the benefits of Shnai Mikra and the brachas that it brings you, which is not common for a mitzvah. Mitzvah usually is do this. Here, it brings like a lot of the stuff. For example, it explains if you do Shnai Mikra, then you'll be zeicha to arichas yamim, a long life, and shanim toivus, which is like good years, and you won't be schlepped to do averos and things like that. So it goes through a whole bunch of stuff that are very good things. You won't it's a skula, a lot of different things. So a person's going to tell himself this whole idea of Shnai Mikra it's like a minig, it's a nice thing, it brings you brachas. You don't have to do it. So the halacha tells you, and in the Gemara also, it doesn't quite say that there's a chiyuv to do it. It says that I forgot who the Tana was, that he praised the sons who did it. He uses a lashon that's not so clear that it's a chiyuv. However, because of that, so the Shulchan Aruch over the Kitzur here says chayav kol adam, and I think the Alter Rebbe uses the same lashon. I'm not mistaken, to tell you that you're mechuyev to do it. This is a real thing. You have to do Shnai Mikra. It's a regular thing. In fact, some say that it's a halacha, I guess you could say, or a mitzvah that dates itself all the way to the times of Moshe Rabbeinu. Well, it's an old thing of doing Shnai Mikra all the way from back then. What are some of the reasons why? So there's two reasons why we do Shnai Mikra, at least that I was able to see. One of them is not as relevant anymore, and one of them is more relevant. The one that's not as relevant is that people used to get called up to the Torah. And when they would get called up to the Torah, they would read. Yeah, the guy who got the aliyah, he would be the one that reads. Nowadays, we have one Bal Korah, and when someone gets called up, he reads as his shliach. So it used to be that people will get called up. So the way to learn the parsha is that every single week you should make sure to review the parsha, meaning the actual reading of the words, so you should know what to do. Nowadays, we don't do that anymore. Right, nowadays we don't do that. Nowadays you have the chazen, some do, but usually it's either because number one, no one learned the parsha, or number two, or it's someone's bar mitzvah, whatever they say, do you mind if I read? So fine, but mostly, but it's not a thing that we do it anymore. Officially, you have a Bal Korah that does it. So that's not as relevant today. But the other one that is relevant is that the more you read the Torah, sort of, you become a buck, you become well versed in the Torah itself, which is a very important thing. Even though we spend most of our time learning other parts of Torah Shabbat Peh, let's say, but Torah Shabbat you have to know, you have to. So the way to learn it is by doing Shnai Mikra. You ever meet people that they could repeat, the trop of different parshas? Sometimes they learned it, and sometimes they didn't. They just did Shnai Mikra for so many years that they already know the flow. So either way, the point is that it is something that we should be doing very strongly. There are even those that do it wearing a hat and a jacket, and there also the place can also speak about that. Some people, you don't make a hefsek, you do it straight. Right, we'll talk about the Lubavitcher minhag soon, but they go straight. They don't speak in between. They don't do any hefsek or thing like that. If you could do that, that's the best way to do it, obviously. But that's just to show you how important it is. So now let's see it inside. Everyone has to finish the parsha together with the tzibur every single week. The Hainu, what does that mean? When there's a sheyikre b'kol shavua parshas hashavua, every single week you have to finish that parsha. Why? Because that's the parsha that we as a tzibur are reading this week. And what's the way to do it? Shnaya mikra ve'echa targum. Twice the pasuk, and once targum onklus. Now, when does that start during the week? So he says, technically, it really starts from Sunday. Yeah, from that Sunday, it already starts we know from the Alter Rebbe where he said learning the parsha of that day. So once we start dealing with this parsha, they used to write in shtaris, in contracts. They still do. They'll write, let's say, besides for the date and the month, they would write Aleph leparshas vayelach whatever. Right? Lech lecha is the easy one because it's the first word. But sometimes they'll do other stuff. They'll do Aleph leparshas v'Hashem beiraches whatever. In other words, what do you mean? That's not parshas v'Hashem beirach. It's a specific parsha. But they use like poetic ways of describing the time they connect it to the Torah, to the parsha. So there's always a correlation between that whole week. So from Sunday, it's already called Imat Tzibur. Because Shekvar Hischidu HaTzibur Parshazu b'Shabbos b'Mincha. Because by the Mincha before, we already started reading it. Yeah, Shabbos all the way till Mincha is the previous Parsha. And then you already introduced the next week. So even though that's the case, that technically from Sunday it already counts, but Ava Mitzvah Min HaMufkar Hi Likreisa Be'erev Shabbos Achar Chatzois Hayir. However, the Kitzur says that the best time to do this is really from Friday after Chatzois. That's the most ideal time. It's already a Shabbos zone. Now let's take a look before. Let's do. Okay, let's continue inside. Let's see if we can finish this today. And then we'll go to the bottom to the minute. Is kol parsha. The best way to do this is number one, likres, to do it like with the trop. Yeah, some people they just go left. So the best way to do it is actually with the trop. If you know trop, if you know how to do it, that's the best way to do it with the thing. And mukubalim are very makbid to do it like that, specifically with the trop. If you could, if you're running late and it's already they're about to lane, and so you can figure it out. But ideally, do it with the trop. Now, what does it mean you should do? So here he says the way you should do it is likres kol parsha. Read the entire parsha. Now, parsha doesn't mean this week is parshas. Last week is parshas Noach. This is parshas Lech Lecha. It doesn't mean that you read the whole parsha from beginning to end. What it means is the hainu psucha istuma. The psukim, the parshas that are inside the Torah. Yeah, the way that's broken up. Now, so he says the way you should do it is shtei pam and read the whole thing twice. Right, so once, twice, and then do the targum. And then he quotes some people that agree, but that's not the way we do it. Va'afilu haparsha, as we'll see soon. Now, va'afilu haparsha misayemes be'emtze pasuk. Even though sometimes some of the parshas, not too many, but some of them they end in the middle of a pasuk. So, nevertheless, yafsik sham, you should stop there because that's the way it's written in the Torah. Now, he brings in the Alter Rebbe, and we'll see again later on the bottom that we don't do it this way. What do we do? The way you should do this is read every single pasuk twice, not the whole parsha, and then v'targum ola miyad. And then the targum right away. Well, minig zeh nachon yoser. The Alter Rebbe says this minig is a proper way to do it, and that's indeed our minig, as we'll see on the bottom in a minute. Ubagmar, when you finish the whole parsha, yesh leimar, you should say achar targum when you finish the whole thing. So what's the last thing you said? Targum, yeah, because shnai mikra ve'echa targum. So you finish off with unklis. So when you finish the whole thing, those that have a minig is that they say they do a pasuk echad b'Torah. They'll reread the last pasuk. So you do the pasuk twice, targum unklis, and then they reread the last one. If you look at some of the ones that they had here, they bought once a whole bunch of these like blue shnai mikra ve'echa targum ones, the big fat ones. So if you look in the end of every single parsha, you'll see it does that. It has twice pasuk, once the targum, and then it says the pasuk again. Now, why do you do that? because you want to finish with Torah, not with the Targum. Now, if you look in the bottom, it says Gimel. So over here, they quote from the from I think from the Rebbe, where it says Ein min ageno lichba pasuk mikra b'seif haseder. Our minig is we don't do that. You finish off with Targum, and you don't have to repeat a pasuk. So just for you to know. And also, he says another point there on the bottom. He says Gam pasuk Shema kreiflin shnai mikra b'echad Targum. Usually in halacha it says if someone says Shema twice, you make them be quiet because it's wait, yeah. Why do you do that? Because Shema, if you say it twice, it shows that you're not honoring Hashem. It's like you're talking to two Eibishters. It doesn't look good. But over here, for Shnai Mikra, you could go it over twice. Okay, that's now the as we said before, the best way to do this is to go all the way through without stopping. The meaning that we have is we also read the Torah. Not everyone does that. Which again, we don't do that either, which is to say Shir Hashirim, it's not necessarily their meaning. Now, on the bottom, he says like this. He says, let's look at Dalet first. We'll go back to Aleph in a second. Dalet says, B'Shabbos Reish Chodesh, when you have Shabbos Reish Chodesh, which means that you're going to have more than one Haftarah, or Parshas Mechubara is also where you have more than one Haftarah. So Chodesh Shtei Haftarahs, you should do both Haftarahs. Yeah, when do you do it? You do one on Friday, as we'll see shortly. Oh, we'll see in a second. Now, the Shabbos Agadol, the Shabbos before Pesach, if it's not Erev Shabbos, Kreide B'Yechidus, Gam Haftarah V'Arva, you'll also do, there's one Haftarah that we switch, if it's Shabbos Agadol, if it's the day before Pesach or not. So he says you'll do also the one of Arva, which you wouldn't do in that week, but you'll do it anyways when you do Shnai Mikra. Now, what's our minig? So look at Aleph. Let's go back a second to Aleph. It sounds like this. The Siei Chabad Hayu Ma'avidim Es HaSedra. The way that the Rebbes would do it is like this, that they would go over the Parsha U'Shtayim, only one or two. So let's say Rishon, or maybe part of Rishon Sheni, and they would do this B'Yom Chamishi B'Layla, Thursday night, early Yom Shishi, which is before Friday. So they would do one or two Aliyahs Thursday night. And then B'Yom Shishi, the next day on Friday, Achar Chatzos, after Chatzos, like we mentioned, Shuv, they would start again Me'aschala from the beginning. And then they would do the whole thing from the beginning till the end with the Haftarah. Shabbos Babayker, and then the next day on Shabbos, before davening, Shuv, they would go again and do Beishvi'i, the last Aliyah. Now, what would they do, like you asked, if you have a few Haftarahs? So like this, Kishahayu Beis Haftarahs. Let's say it's a week that there's two Haftarahs. Hayu Eimnim Haftarahs Hasedra. They would do the Haftarah of the proper Parsha B'Yom HaShishi on Friday. So when you do the whole Parsha, you do the Haftarah that goes together with the Sedra. The Hashniya and the additional one that we're doing now, that you'll do b'Shabbos and Shabbos morning. Okay, that's the way we talk to do it. Now, why would they do this way? I'm not saying you have to do this, but there is an inyan that you shouldn't do the whole. There's two things that you balance. Number one, people say you shouldn't do the whole thing in one day, because the whole idea is you should be repeating it throughout the week. So you don't want to do it in one day. So they would divide it between Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos. But you also want to finish the whole thing without a half six. So therefore, on Friday, they would do the whole thing straight. And the Friedrich Rebbe said, I think it was about this minig actually, that the minig in Lubavitch was miyusid on ruchniistic things, and it's negea benefesh. So I don't know that Chassidim do this. I don't know that I've ever seen this, but for sure the Rebbe did it this way. One last thing I want to end off with, the last bit we'll save for tomorrow. But one last thing I want to end off with is like this: that someone once asked the Rebbe that, let's say they have to choose between Chassidus and Shnai Mikra, which one should go first? So what do you think would be the proper answer? Chassidus, right? So the Rebbe said you should do Shnai Mikra first. Why? Because Shnai Mikra has a set time, and also you'll finish at a certain time. It's not forever. Chassidus, you could start learning Chassidus. You're going to get caught up. You're going to get distracted, right? And then which is a good thing, means you're getting caught up in your Chassidus. But the Rebbe says better do Shnai Mikra. This way, it's done. It's out of the way. It's not going to drag on, and then you'll learn Chassidus after. Okay, we'll finish the Siv tomorrow.